What's up, Lee?
Not much.
How are you this morning, man?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. You just kind of going through the ether right
Yeah,
now and the motions.
yeah, just kind of doing my normal thing, my normal Saturday, I guess.
Your new life for the
Yeah,
next
just
however many weeks. Yeah, well,
yeah.
welcome everybody. It's the Denko Grid. Oh my goodness, I can't even talk. The Denko Gridiron post week show, week 4 recap show. We're all just kind of struggling as we're flying by the seat of our pants this morning. My name is Stephen Peters. In the studio to my digital left is Lee Livingston. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot this morning, we got home a little earlier last night, and I just crashed.
Oh yeah,
Was-
man.
I
That's
don't know. I was just exhausted, and I just kind of conked.
yeah. I mean, those
One
Friday
of those
night
nights.
blowouts can do that to you. You've already been at one game the previous night, and then you go to another one, and it kind of. I mean, it moved quick. Don't get me wrong, um, but it's just kind of like it's boring a little bit, and you're just kind of ready for it to be over with, and can suck the life force out of you. So hopefully you can get some good recoup after our show today, and veg out, watch Oklahoma do whatever they do to Tulsa today.
That's what I'm hoping. Chill for a little bit, and then you know, I don't know if we'll watch football, edit. We got a million things. It feels like there's a million things to do on every weekend. So
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Well, let's get right into it. We've got some games to go over, some stock down, stock up that we normally go over. Talk about some players, what we saw for our 2 games. So let's kick it off with some news and notes. Our Denko Gridiron teams this week went 9-10. That's not including the cross county games. Winning teams won by a lot this week. There's a lot of big margins of victory. They won by an average of 34.3 in the games that they won in the 9. And then in the games they lost, it was an average of 21.1. So when we won big. And when we lost, we didn't lose quite as big. So that was good to see. And also some pretty big offensive performance from our top 10 players in averages only. Passing for those top 10 for the week, whereas an average of 312 yards, 3.4 touchdowns throughout the games. Rushing was 145.7 for an average of 1.2 touchdowns, and receiving was 165.3 to 2.2. So don't know what got into teams this week, but the players put it on them, and when they had a big game this week.
yeah, it definitely felt like this was a good week for us with the Denko teams.
Yep.
Just loved seeing. It felt like there were some teams that bounced back in big ways, and there were
Sure.
some teams. There were a couple teams that regressed a little bit, or in some way, shape, or form, or maybe confirmed
what they are.
And then, that always stinks a little bit. But then there were some teams that we'll kind of get into a little bit here later that I think took steps up, kept showing, or bounced back from losses, whatever it may have been. It's just good to see by week 4, like, hey, they're going to keep battling, keep going through this thing, and keep pushing for playoff spots. I think here towards the end of the season, like they're not just going to lay down and roll over and give way to whatever happens, right? Like that. And I think that's always a big thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's still some teams that we're just not 100% sold on either way. They've had up and down. Kind of looking at Geyer in that respect. Same thing with Prestonwood and who's the other team I'm thinking of? Little Elm. They've struggled. They've had some good moments, and then they screw the pooch and fall flat on their face. So you don't really know where they're at in terms of where they stack up against the rest of the teams, either in the area or in their district. So there's a lot still to be decided, but we do know a lot about some teams, and we do whether that's good or whether that's bad.
Yeah, and since we're kind of segueing into into our first segment here with the stock down stuff, and you kind of brought up Little Elm, it definitely stunk seeing the 51-10 score with McKinney.
Yep.
Obviously, you mentioned it. I think it was in your recap article this was a tough matchup to start the season because McKinney is looking more and more as every week kind of goes by, just kind of like the juggernaut in that particular district right
Yep.
now. They're going to be a very tough out later in the playoffs. They've got a stout defense. The offense is looking a lot better than it was a year ago. It's a really good team. Thought Little Elm would have put up a little bit more of a fight. 10
Yeah.
points is really a bummer. Now the strength for McKinney is obviously that defense. So I don't think it's the end of the world for Little Elm or anything. It's obviously, like we said, it's hard to reiterate. I don't want to keep reiterating it. Like McKinney is just such a brutal opener, but
Yep.
they've got to go through two. I think it's what is it, Geyer and Prosper the next couple of games. Their opener, their first 3 games of district are rough.
Yeah.
So we want to see them put up some kind of fight. I think here in these next couple of games, because if they just get blown out, that's where I'm going to get real worried. Okay, maybe
Yep.
that Prestonwood game was just a bit of a fluke.
And that's kind of where I'm leaning at too. Is how much of a false hope did that 28-14 against Prestonwood give us? You look at Little Elm's schedule. They lost by 15 to Bowie. This is a team they beat last year. Again, granted, they lost some good players as well as Kellen Tasby to transfer. They get smoked by Eaton by 35. And then they lose by 41 to McKinney. So there's, 3 out of the 4 games that we've seen, and at least just box score wise, we haven't seen any game in person yet, show that maybe they're not as good as we were kind of giving them praise to. And maybe that kind of speaks a little bit to Prestonwood as well. Maybe they're not as good as we thought they were. They lost last night as well to All States, who came back to win that one. So, I would have liked to have seen a little more out of Little Elm, but maybe they are what they are right now at this point.
Yeah, and another team, because I think there's a couple others we probably could have had on the stock down stuff that where I think Prestonwood's maybe a team where I'm starting to get pretty worried about them, just because it feels like they're just not putting the wins together, and they're a solid team, but it's like last week we talked about, that game was marked as a draw, and sure, maybe they could have mounted a comeback or something in the second half had they gotten to play it or whatever, but at the end of the day, it felt like a loss. Little Elm was controlling a lot of that game by half. I mean, like at some point you need to start putting some wins together. Otherwise, it's hard to, even if you do make the playoffs, you want to have some kind of momentum going in because of just the way the structure of the playoffs works here in high school football.
Yeah. Now, you kind of question, was last year's Prestonwood run to the state finals a fluke? Was it just a flash in a pan type thing? They've got one more game before, I think actually 2 more games before they get to district play. So they've got some time still, unlike other area teams, to figure themselves out. But starting October 6th against TCA Addison, and then Nolan Catholic, and then Bishop Lynch, and then Parrish. I mean, there's not a lot of wins in that district to begin with right now. Everybody is below 500, so maybe everybody's down. But there's some cause for concern with Prestonwood for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think the other team that I just want to kind of get out of the way is I think we'll talk more about them later, because I want to talk more about it once we actually get into the game. Is going to be Aubrey. That's a team that I'm stocked down on, but obviously they were struggling coming in. But I'll talk a little bit more about them once we actually kind of recap the game, because I think it's going to be hard to dissociate why their stock is down without actually talking more in depth about that particular game.
For sure.
So
no, I agree. I think we've kind of stayed low on Aubrey since week 1.
Yeah.
And nothing that I saw last night, we'll talk about later, changes that mindset. So, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. A couple other teams to mention in our stock down report. Denton, they haven't started district play yet, but they have the only win is over a not great Chisholm Trail team, and they should have been able to beat Gainesville last night, I thought. So losing to a 4A school, when you had the lead early as well as late, and then you cough it up. I don't see how the path to the playoffs for Denton this year. Lake Dallas looks really good. We know Emerson's really good. Argyle put a can of whoop on Montgomery last night. We'll talk about them here in a little bit. So maybe Argyle has turned the corner and are back to being a dominant team. So it's going to be hard for Denton to make a run, I think, this year. I think they'll be battling amongst the have-nots in that district just to be the 5th seed.
Yeah, that's kind of where I think I lean now. I mean, losing to a team that's a full classification below you is rough to begin with, and then at the end of the day, like it's similar to Prestonwood. At some point, you got to start putting the wins on the board, and it feels like throughout the season so far, we're 4 weeks in. It's like I would have liked to have seen them with a couple of them, and it's like maybe it felt like that Newman Smith game was a bit of a like that just should not have been the blowout. Like, and this is not to take anything away from Newman Smith because I think Newman Smith looked really good that week.
Yeah,
it's just Denton looked so outmatched, and that's the kind of team that you need to at least you got to look competitive.
Yeah,
and they haven't looked competitive in a lot of games, and that's where it's like, I mean, how are you supposed to make the playoffs when you're getting beaten I mean, they're getting beaten handily a lot of the times here for 3 weeks, and this feels more like the Denton team, not from last year, but 2 years ago.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't feel like last year where they were scrappy and giving some other people some problems here and there, and like by the end of the season, that Lake Dallas versus Denton game felt like, oh, this could be like really fun and exciting to go to because it's 2 local teams battling for like it's essentially this extra round of playoffs. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't either.
I hate beating a mother down. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of we're 4 weeks into the season and we kind of know we see the trend. That Newman Smith game might have been a disappointing outcome, but maybe it was a tell of just this isn't the year, and then you barely beat, like I said, a bad Chisholm Trail team, and then you lose to a 4A team. When you have aspirations to be a playoff team, that doesn't happen. Then you have to open up with Emerson. You're still going to have to deal with Argyle and Lake Dallas. Can you beat Independence? Can you beat Memorial? I mean, you're going to have to find wins amongst the bad teams and try to flip one of the teams you lost to last year to get into the playoffs. That's just kind of have to, unless the top teams beat each other up, which I can't really see happening. I think it's going to be Emerson's district to win. You're going to have to flip somebody. So,
yeah, even if the good teams beat each other up, it's like you're relying on other teams to knock the others out of the playoffs in some weird fashion, and then you still have to steal a win from someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just you can't rely on the others to do that.
That's not the way to do it. It's and so I feel I'm I think that might probably gonna be the last of us beating up on Denton because I don't know what else is gonna unless something changes and they start rolling off some wins here and they figure things out. I don't know.
Yep. All right. Moving on to another Denton ISD school. That's going to be Guyer. Boy, I know we went stock down a couple weeks ago when they lost to Aledo, but that's just because just a loss. We were high on them. We saw good things from the week before, and then they lose to Aledo, which is fine, state champion. But then you barely beat Lancaster, and that looks suspect because they got they lost to McKinney North this week, so that is a big head scratcher for Guyer as a win. You hear about the quad 1 wins and March Madness and everything like that. Like, how good is that win over Lancaster now? And then you lose to Prosper for the first time since 2020, or since they've won 5 straight since 2020. They lost that streak, and then they lost their district win streak, which was at 9. They're probably a playoff team, But they're definitely not going to be semifinals to state title contender unless something really changes with that defense. Because Prosper took it from them in that second half, and I mean, there's nothing really you can say about that. I'm sure that program is elated to finally knock off Geyer, kind of similar to how Geyer felt after knocking off Allen last year. Um, but yeah, that stock is way down, and they might get D2, C2, or the fourth place out of the district, but it's going to be a long, memorable run, I don't think, for the Geyer program this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you there. I think this is the game that made me kind of go, all right, they're a solid team that can make the playoffs, win a game or two. Maybe they'll upset somebody and get a round or two further than I think they will. But I'm not looking at them going, oh, this is the same team from the last 4 years that made the semifinals. And I think the big reason for that is just some statistical stuff here from like mainly from last night, because the box score is just a little bit kind of scary. Like if you kind of just not scary in a sense of like this is like a bad team or anything. They're still a solid team. It's just there's no and this actually it's kind of the same for Prosper also, who I thought was going to be. I thought Geyer and Prosper, more so Prosper, was going to be this like duking it out with someone maybe McKinney for that top spot, and then Geyer was going to be a sneaky team in the playoffs later. But there's just no standout in the box score for Geyer offensively. And Logan McLaughlin, solid game, 60% passing, like that's okay. 265 yards, touchdown, interception. You can live with that, get by with it. There's no 100-yard rusher for Geyer. Like Nathan Tinbarge for Prosper, good game, 93 yards rushing on 14 attempts, right? But he didn't have a monster game passing. It's just like there's no one from this game really stood out to me as like other than actually Corbin Glasgow had a really good game, but neither side had a offensive player that I'm just like, wow, guy's a monster. That's someone that's going to be a difference maker later in those big games down the road. I that's where like both these teams to me are stocked down. Not that Prosper is one of the teams that we actually cover. It's just this was a game where I'm like, it felt like the playmakers, at least on one side of the ball, didn't really show out, which is kind of a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, and you saying that kind of then brings it to this was a game that was winnable for Geyer, regardless of how ugly it was or how low scoring it was early. There was chances to win, and they just didn't take it. Prosper took it from them, and to be a contender in 6A, regardless if it's D1 or D2, you have to take those moments. Remember last year against DeSoto. DeSoto took it from them, and they had a full complement with Jackson Arnold and that defense and everything, and they took it from them, and then they gave it back and took it from them again, and then toyed with them the rest of the way. It was like so. Yeah, I see a playoff spot. You lose maybe one or two more, then you're kind of questioning, okay, who's going to sneak up on you and catch you? But
I think Geyer, the more I look at it, if McKinney is just this juggernaut, right? Like they're just gonna, if they're playing clean, good football, they're not gonna lose through district. This is the kind of team, like this and Prosper, I think are the teams where I've kind of got like the caution flag out. And if Little Elm, that false hope kind of thing we were talking about, these are the two teams where I'm like, maybe Little Elm screws one of these two teams' seasons up.
Or Braswell.
Yeah,
Braswell. Or Boyd or Rock Hill.
Braswell.
I mean,
honestly, any of the teams that maybe don't get into the playoffs could ruin one of these two seasons, and then someone else is getting in. Yeah, I think I could easily see that playing out this year because these two teams just don't. I think both Geyer and Prosper feel like they are not what we thought they were, and it feels like one of them could, if any slip up against one of those the teams that we kind of put in that lower tier in 5-6A, could just ruin a season for them, and
For sure.
we could all be grabbing our hair and trying to pull it. What in
For
the
sure.
world happened in this district?
For sure, yeah. The last few years had been like the North Side District of Doom for the DFW. Right now, it's just kind of like the District of what? So, because if you would have told me the first week of district play that Braswell and Geyer would have the same overall record, but Braswell would be 1-0 and Geyer would be 0-1, I wouldn't have believed you. that's just that's just a fact of the matter. I mean, that's kind of where I was leaning toward to begin the season. So, I mean, kudos to them, and we'll talk about them here in a little bit too.
Yep.
All right, one more team in our stock down before we take a quick break. Ponder. So huge win last week over Crump to win that one over a stretch of 2 days. They did the cricket thing where they'll start on one day and then finish the next day. But they took off and knocked off Crumb and looked good for a half against Godly last night. And then don't know what happened in the second half. I would love to be able to talk to Schultz at some point soon about the second half, but they were outscored 41-0 in the second half to lose 53-14. Is that what the score was?
Yeah, 53-14 is the final score.
Yeah, the 28-0 alone in the fourth quarter. So something happened. Godly found some magic secret stuff, but not magic, Michael's secret stuff, and put it on them. So a little bit of a disappointment for Ponder, considering the emotional high of beating Crumb last week, and feeling good about yourself.
Yeah, definitely a huge drop off. It's like, man, we beat that crosstown rival. Like we're or not crosstown rival, but the highway rival, 156, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Just a bummer. I think I don't know how else to put it. It's like, it's a bummer to have that happen. I think this is hopefully a game where you just wash it off, get on to the next one. Because it's not a district game. It's not a district.
No,
yeah,
next week is a district game.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Is next
week.
Oh,
sorry. Yep.
District opener. I was trying to make sure. I was trying to.
No, you're good. I jumped the gun.
So get this thing off the slate. You had a good game last week. Lost a close one early in the year. Like, you've played some good football. You played good football the first couple weeks of the season. Had this rough one right before district, which does suck because you really obviously want to be steamrolling into district. That's always the way, things want to work. It's like I mentioned with the playoffs, but you've played 2 out of 3 good games. Hold on to that. Let's just wash this one out. Hold on to whatever it is you were doing those first couple games.
Yeah.
And move. I think that's the good thing about this is I'm not going to look at this and go I'm not fully offloading all of my Ponder shares or something.
Sure.
Like it may be a decent amount, but I'm concerned with Ponder, but this also feels like a Ponder team that could, I don't know how to feel, because it's like I didn't get to see all of the Ponder Crumb game, and I don't have
same here.
Tons of statistics. Yeah, and I know you didn't get to either, so it's like it's hard. But it's like, man, they had a couple of good wins coming in. It felt like, or a couple of good games.
Yeah,
and that Crumb game I think matters a lot. So.
Right. And, you got to wonder. So last year, Ponder had a very prolific offense and we're putting up, nearly 60 points a game, but their defense was giving up 53. You got to wonder if last night Godly somehow recalled the 2022 defense back to Ponder.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Because that's what it looks like, is they just, the offense went kaput. And the defense decided to just stand there, maybe. So I don't know. Hopefully, they take the positives from the first half and kind of extrapolate that into their district opener with Paradise next week, who's 4-0, and that's going to be a tough matchup. Paradise is going to be tough. Brock is, even though they got their doors blown off against Gunner last night, they're still going to be good. And you're going to go with Whitesboro, who lost to Sulphur from Oklahoma. So those teams are still going to be good, and you're going to have to contend with the Boyds, the Peasters, the Pilot Points for that fourth playoff spot.
Yeah. Now, the one good thing I think and again, this is just reiterating a point already, is that Crumb had a pretty good win this week, and we're going to get into that win here in just a little bit after a quick break, which hopefully this little that little bit will kind of give you Ponder fans a little bit of a I'm trying to think of the right word, hope, or I don't know, whatever word I'm trying to think of. Give me 30 seconds and I'll figure it out.
Everything's bigger in Texas, especially Texas high school football. We're entering our 7th season with the Denko Gridiron platform. We started this 7 years ago, right across the street at West Oak Coffee Bar. Just an idea to bring content directly wherever you are. Be a part of the community. Join us. Help our contributors to tell the stories each and every Friday night throughout the season. Talking your town, your team.
Yeah, I don't know the word I'm thinking of. So, well, we've lost Steven for just a second. So,
Have you lost me? Have you lost
there
me?
we go.
Oh, sorry.
He's back.
I turned down the volume so I could drink some water. Sorry. What I was saying was roll the clip for 30 more seconds so you can figure out the word, and then
I'll just keep rolling it until I can think of something.
There you go.
Let me grab a thesaurus real quick.
So that was our stock down. We have Denton High, Denton Geyer, Ponder, and Little Elm. Those are the teams we're kind of down on after this week. Next up is our stock up. The teams that we putting some money into those penny stocks because they were down before, and now they're catching a nice little wave upward. And that's going to start off with Argyle. Mentioned it earlier, just completely destroyed Montgomery down in Belton last night, 62-0. I don't know how good or how bad Montgomery is. They only lost 41-20 last year in this game, but it was quite a display of offensive excellence for for Argyle. And that's what you wanted to see, especially before you get into this district play. John Gailey had a fantastic game. His QB rating, according to Max Preps, was 147.9. He threw for 366 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's what you've been wanting to see out of him for a very long time, since last year, basically. The rushing attack was solid. Preston Slayton led the way with 98. The team had 161. So it was a massively impressive game after you basically had a bye week last week when you played 18 total snaps between Argyle and Grapevine before it was canceled. So hopefully what you're thinking of is that type of performance. You won't get it every week. It's impossible. But going into that week 1 district matchup against Lake Dallas, that's what you wanted to see.
Yeah, it's exactly what I think needed out of Argyle. It's what the Eagles needed to do. And if you're an Argyle fan, you wanted to see it. Just steamroll someone, get rolling into Falcon Stadium next week.
Well, hold on. Sorry, I was wrong. They play Memorial first. So you get a layup there, and then you play Lake Dallas. So
yeah, Lake Dallas is in 2 weeks. Okay. I think this is exactly what you needed. So I don't really have anything to add. I mean, it's just this felt like a old-fashioned Argyle win. So
yeah, this was, if CJ Rogers was still here, this is exactly the type of win you would have had when they won state in 2020. It was so, or was it 2021? I can't remember.
I don't know. They've won state a few times in my.
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was 2020. If I look at my numbers, yeah, it was 2020 when they went 16-0 with CJ Rogers at quarterback. That's the type of win you would have had last night. So it's good to see them do that again because it's been a while. All right, next up, we were talking about it just a minute ago. Crum, they lost last week, only scored 9 to Ponder, and we've just talked about how suspect that defense was last year. Maybe it reared its head last night. But they were able to outduel a pretty good Cato Mills team, 51-47. Cato went to the second round last year, finished 11-1. So that's a heck of a win for Crum to get after a tough loss to Ponder last week.
Yeah, this felt like a very big win for Crum. Getting ready for district play here, and it's next week. They start district play.
Van Alstine Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to pronounce that correctly or just butcher that. But this is where I kind of get into the, if you're a Ponder fan, maybe last night, but last night was a bit fluky. Who knows? Because Crum came out here and played really good football. And if you're a Crum fan, man, this feels really, really good to go out and beat somebody that was an 11-1 team last year. And to do it, I think, in a close game also feels really good. I think that just gives you that added boost of when you're in that tight district game, you're going to be able to go out and compete. That just always feels good, winning those tighter games, especially against good opponents. It just kind of feels like you can outdo somebody else. Doesn't matter how good they are or whatever. Sometimes, you win by a lot of points, and that always feels good to win by a lot. It's just, I think when you know you can win those tighter games, you have a little bit of repetition and you know what you're doing late in the fourth quarter, late in drives. So that's why I think like this being a little bit closer and not just some kind of, we ran away with it in the second half, blew them out, is probably a good thing for Crum, right? Like they've played some tight football games here. They played two games that were fairly tight, especially that Burke Bennett game that they were able to win. So I think that's good for them headed into district play, that they've played a couple games and they've shown that they can win those close ones there late in games.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the score is a little kind of misleading because Crum at one point I think was only up by 3 or so, and they kept trading scores to where Crum would go up by 2 scores, and then it would be a 1-score game, when the 2 scores and 1-score game, something like that. I was following along on the Dave Campbell's app, so it was kind of hard to remember all the numbers and everything. But still, it's impressive that you bounce back, you put 45 on a playoff team from last year, a good playoff team from last year, and hold serve at home and get the win and have some good juju going into district play next week.
Well, and a huge and I don't remember if we'll talk about him later. We might, but just massively efficient night for Ty Tabor.
Yes.
So that's I think that's big, is him coming back, having a big night. They're getting the play they need from him. That guy is just, if he's balling out the way that he can, I think Crum is going to make the playoffs. Just that they'll be smooth sailing for them. If he's playing the way he's capable of, I don't see them having a problem making the playoffs, because he's just that kind of quarterback that's tough to stop.
Yep. Yeah. So this is the thing with Ty. Ty's a really good quarterback when he's on. The thing last year that kind of sunk them, because he's a sophomore last year, thrust into being the QB1 and kind of still wet behind the ears, and he would have some good games, and then it would fall off the next week, or he'd start a quarter really well, and then it would drop off for a quarter and a half, and just really inconsistent play. So that's what you're going to need out of him moving forward, especially now that you're starting district play next week. Okay, you have this rock solid game where you have 5 touchdowns to 3 incompletions. I mean, you don't really see that a lot. But to go for 352 yards, and I guess to get those 5 scores, okay, do that next week. Van Alstein's not going to be a layup again, so bring your A game. And even against the teams that you should beat easily, bring your A game, so we can emphatically say, hey, we're that team. We're going to make some noise. Watch out for Crum.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. So I think this is our last team on the stock up one, and I know you were pretty excited about this game, or excited to see what Braswell would do.
Yep.
I thought Rock Hill would give them a lot more of a challenge, and I thought they would probably pull the game out just because they could throw the ball a little bit more. Braswell won this game emphatically. It was all Bengals.
Yep.
This was not Rock Hill's night. And I mean, I'm happy Braswell won. It's one of our teams we cover, and
sure.
I'm not going to complain about the Bengals going out and getting a win. So
yeah, absolutely.
Good job. Tip of the cap to them and the new coaching staff over there. Love to see it.
Absolutely. And we talked about this on Wednesday. This was one of those games you absolutely had to flip from last year's loss. So you went 1-6. If you want to get into the playoffs, you're looking at maybe 4 wins in district, and you had to flip 3. So keep the Boyd game and flip Rock Hill, Little Elm, and who else am I missing? Rock Hill, Little Elm. Oh, probably just like either Allen, McKinney, Geyer, or Prosper. Hard to do, but you have to flip maybe 3. So you took step 1. You got that by beating Rock Hill with a very dominating ground game, 300 some odd yards on the ground. It's not the norm for 5A and 6A teams to just rely on the ground game and wear you down that way. Maybe 4A and below, see Aubrey of last year or the year before. But huge shout out to that defense for Braswell for shutting down Rock Hill, and another shout out to that offensive line and the running attack that just mollywopped them. I mean, that's all you can say. I mean, it was 34-14 isn't a huge margin of victory. It's 20 in 6A, which is still big, but I think it's just the style of winning is more impressive than the spread.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's it's good to see that Braswell knows who they are and where the bulk of their talent is, and they just
that you could not have said that any better. I'm glad you said that because I felt like that's been the issue for the last few years. They just didn't know who they were. They were trying to be everybody else, trying to be a system that didn't accommodate the players that they had, and it just didn't work out. And maybe this is because of Kent Laster's style. I don't know if that's his style is to go ground heavy, or he just recognizes I don't really have the quarterback play and the receiver play, so we're just going to go ground and use 4 or 5 running backs or use our dual threat. So I'm glad you said that because that's exactly how this kind of comes off.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the best coaches do is they adapt to the player. Like you have an identity of some kind, and then you adapt to whatever your player's strengths are. If you can't do that, I think that's that's a fault. But
sure.
and that's a good thing to see. Like last year, I thought these guys, Braswell, after going to that Fossil Ridge game and kind of watching them, I thought this was going to be I thought they were going to be a team that was very similar to kind of the Titans, where it's like, okay, throw the ball 15 times. It's a lot to ask of a team to do that, where it's like throw the ball anywhere from 12 to 15 times, run the ball, rely on your 2 running backs. You have a couple really good wideouts, but it's like just take your shots downfield, across the middle, wherever you've got talented wideouts, you got talented skill position players. Like you don't have, and then run the ball 30, 40 times, make the ground game your bread and butter. And then when you do throw the ball, it forces everyone to kind of stack the box. And then you have your wideouts that are bigger and kind of better than these corners. They're stuck in an island by themselves, which is what you saw the Titans doing with AJ Brown for a while. And it
worked.
Guys like that, it works really well when you have that. Obviously, it's a little bit of pressure on a high school quarterback to say, hey, we're going to give you 12 to 15 passing attempts. Please be really efficient with it.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So they definitely seem like they recognize what they are, relying on that running game, and it got them the dub, and they're right now in the driver's seat for a playoff spot. And you just have to kind of, take care of business. Don't rely on others to do it for you. So, kudos to Braswell. They are one of the 3 teams that our stock is up on. Now, when we say this, that doesn't mean that no other team has high stock. That we had 6A that was off. Then you have the teams like Byron Nelson or Northwest or Ryan or those schools right now who have just stayed really high on our list because of how well they've played. So their stock staying at it as it is, and not to give you a disservice, but if you're killing it week after week, we don't want to just kind of beat a dead horse over and over and say, hey, how great you are. You're great, good. We also want to give some love to the other teams that, have bounced back or are kind of coming up out of nowhere on a rising tide. So,
yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. All righty, so let's go ahead and transition ourselves into the 2 games we saw this week, and we'll go ahead and lead it off with our Thursday night game, which was Wakeland versus Reedy, which was a pretty fun game for the most part.
Yep.
I thought Wakeland was going to. Now, I was a bit surprised because I thought Wakeland was going to be. Thought they were going to have a pretty good chance to win this one, and they did have some chances, but for the most part, it felt like it was all Reedy in this thing. I like Wakeland had some chances early, and they could have kept themselves in it, but that Reedy defense was all over Brennan Meyer from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I say this with all love and respect to Brennan Meyer, but because he is talented, he is a good quarterback. I do think that his height, and this is not something he can control, but his height did hurt him on quite a few throws where I just don't think he could tell that he could step up into the pocket. I don't think it reminded me of watching Baker Mayfield, obviously being a Sooner fan. It's like, yeah, it kind of works in high school and stuff, and even in college, but there's a point in time where, like, maybe the further you get along, it becomes a bit of an issue. And I think there were some times where, yeah, he was under pressure, and you were in the box, so you can probably elaborate more on this and tell me if I'm wrong. But it felt like there were some throws where he missed some guys, and it's a lot. I'm asking a lot of someone who is probably, who is a teenager. I would have liked to see him step up in the pocket into pressure.
What I saw is what I saw. So outside of like maybe the first couple of drives where he had some pretty clean pockets, he had constant pressure.
Yeah, he had.
So Reedy did something where they changed their scheme to almost throw a shadow on Brennan the entire time. That shadow was the very intense Khalil Smith.
Beast.
Man, that kid plays with an edge. Hell, even on that closing drive, he's just yelling and chirping and just all energy. I mean, it's 1,000% gas. Absolutely no brake line exists in that motor. But that was I think Reedy's flip on the script is, okay, we can't get pressure up front for whatever reason, so let's throw a spy and run a delayed blitz with Khalil, or allow him to go up the middle and free one of our edge guys. So when he did step up, Brennan Meyer, he had somebody in his face, and if he tried to scramble, he was being chased down by somebody who's a little bit faster. What this game showed me is how undersized I think Wakeland is up front. I think they're a great skill team on the outside and with their quarterback and their secondary and all that stuff. But in terms of the trenches, that is not their strong suit. Reedy was big. They're bigger than Wakeland was. And it was evident by the running game and giving Hernandez and Ferner some time to throw and make some clutch plays, because they're not the guys that Brennan Meyer are in terms of passing, but they made the plays that they needed to, whether it was to McGrath or whomever on the outside. So that's what I saw. I saw Reedy dominate up front, close down running lanes with ease, open up holes with relative ease, and protect their guy in the pocket, while Wakeland struggled. And it was a struggle with each and every throw to find somebody or not have somebody to step into and hit on the helmet or with your hand or be dunked in the chest or whatever. It was while it was still a 7-point game, in the end, it felt like it was kind of like you said, more in control of Reedy for Reedy than not.
Yeah, and it's good for you to kind of clean up what my thoughts kind of were, because I wasn't 100% sure if that was right or not, just because of where I'm standing. It's like on the ground, that's not always something you can.
That's why coordinators are in the box. They can see things a little bit differently.
100% sure, but it's like it. It's like it. Maybe and I'm looking through the camera. It's like, all right, whatever. But yeah, you could tell, like, on the sidelines and stuff too. It's like Wakeland just it just was like they felt like they got some juice back there at the very end of the game with a late touchdown, and then the onside got recovered, and it was like maybe they had and it was like I couldn't see myself or believing in them stopping Airy in that running game for 4 plays. I was like, that's not going to happen. Like they haven't, like that, just like Reedy running the clock out. I was like we talked about that on Wednesday, where it's like, if Reedy's in a position where they're ahead at the end of the game, I know they can run that clock out. If Wakeland was ahead at the end of the game, that's one thing I would have liked to have seen. What would Wakeland have done at the end of the game? Because they could not run the football at all. I don't know how. That's one thing I would like to find out later as we go along through the year, is what does Wakeland do if they are ahead by 3, to like a one possession at the end of a game, kind of like
Mhm.
Reedy was there at the end. What are they like? Are they just going to have to be throwing the football because couple incompletions and now you've given up 2 free timeouts because you're not going to, they can't run the football the way Reedy, and I don't expect them to run the football by the way Reedy did, but they couldn't run the football at all, which I think is a bit alarming because at some point you need to be able to hand the ball off and just pick up 2 yards.
Yeah.
Something like don't lose yards.
For sure, absolutely. And you're not going to run into a whole bunch of teams like Reedy up front, but
Yeah.
if you reach somebody competent enough, you're going to have to be able to make those holes and win those one-on-one battles in the trenches more times than not to be successful. So, we wrote about this on the website before the season started, kind of like maybe forecasting how teams would fare throughout the year. And this district so far is setting itself up to just be a bloodbath from top to bottom. Frisco is up there. Lone Star is still undefeated. They were off this past week. Then you've got Reedy and Wakeland who have exchanged wins and losses. So it's, you're just kind of, you got to have to let this play out. And it might come down to the last weekend before all 4 playoff seeds are decided. So I still have faith in Wakeland, in that they could be a playoff team and still make a charge for the district title. They're going to have to, force a tiebreaker potentially and beat Lone Star. Same thing with Frisco. But, shout out to Reedy for going toe to toe with a prolific offense and coming out on top with a really grinding type win, even though it was still 35-28.
Yeah, I think you're right that Wakeland is going to be a team that's going to be they got a great shot at the playoffs. I think they're definitely good enough for that. I think this is going to be a Reedy versus Lone Star race. I think those teams having watched those 2 teams now, at least enough to some extent. I would have liked to watch Lone Star one more time, maybe. Like once we get another Lone Star district game under the belt, I think we'll have a little bit more information about them as a team in regards to just what they are and such. But and we have a decent amount of like Davion Gross and stuff. But I think those are that's kind of the 2 horse race that I'm looking at and thinking, okay, that's what this is going to be. And maybe Lone Star gets a couple teams beat them up, but I think it's Reedy versus Lone Star.
Yeah,
for the title, not for just
fair. I'm still gonna kind of keep a weary eye on Frisco though. They're 3-1, 2-0 in district right now. So that October 26th game between Lone Star and Frisco might have a lot of eyes because it could actually be the decider for the district title, or it could not.
I forgot Frisco had been. I forgot they kind of slipped my mind, but
because they're right in the coverage area.
They're a sneaky team right now that I had kind of forgotten about. On Thursday night, they were in my brain.
Yeah.
And then by today,
a whole nother game has happened, which is the next game we're going to talk about, actually. So good segue, Lee. That would be Aubrey and Panther Creek, and we kind of talked about this. We didn't know what to expect out of this game. Somehow Aubrey in our Massey ratings were favored by 20. And it turned out to be not the case. I don't know how they figured that number. Again, it's computers figuring this number. But it was a game of very contrasting styles, and where you have a spread offense that wants to go over the top and shoot its shot every time it can, and then an Aubrey team that's very methodical and grind you down on the run, doesn't have a passing game to speak of, and the new school approach of spread the ball out and get as many snaps in as you can per drive, one versus that methodical approach pretty handedly. And it confirmed that to me how good Panther Creek is and how much trouble they will give Salina and Carter in that district. Whether they challenge for a title, that's another thing. I think we still need to see a few more weeks out of Panther Creek to see what they really are. But and then we also confirmed kind of Aubrey, just the horses aren't there. You don't have LeBraylon Bell. Dylan Brooks is kind of breaking out and separating himself from the pack in terms of that rushing attack. But There's no compliment there. Brumley has an arm, he's just not accurate. And if you don't have an accurate quarterback, it makes those it's weird to say gadget pass plays. They render them moot. And so it was a quick game last night, which was fun to be home way before 10 o'clock. But it just wasn't a fun game to watch. Panther Creek looked just unstoppable against Aubrey last night.
Yeah. So I'll be kind of blunt, and I say this with as much respect,
with all the love.
That is a dead offensive play spot. Like it's 2023. If you've got 5 running backs like you did last year, a bunch of big dudes up front, and maybe not the quarterback, and you don't have a way to throw the football, run a wing tee off it, hand the ball off 400 times, but you don't have enough.
Kind of what Aubrey is.
But they don't have enough running backs.
Well, they don't have the quarterback either. I mean, like,
look, I at least at the end of the day, like, you're not even giving a team a fighting chance when you throw the ball 6 times.
How many completions were there? Tell them, Lee. How many completions?
There was one.
One.
But you threw the ball 6 times. Put someone else in at quarterback. I don't care.
Man,
like, it's 31-7, and you're gonna run the ball. They took 8 minutes off the clock for one drive. Their best drive, the one touchdown drive, they took, I think it was about 8 minutes off the clock.
Yeah.
And
7.5 to be honest, but to be exact. Okay, but yeah, it was.
And so, and you're still down a touchdown at that point. Another touchdown and Panther Creek ends up scoring before the half is over. So now you're down 2. In order to come back in a game like that, it's like, well, we're going to get the ball maybe 2 more times if we do score. Like, you're just like, figure out, you're playing like, and you could tell like no one wants to play that version. No one wants to play Army Navy football unless you're going to Army Navy. Like, and I just, like, you can tell it's not working. Secondly, it's like I mentioned with the Braswell stuff when I was talking about the Titans. If you throw the ball 6 times and those 6 passes are spread out over the course of 60 minutes and there's 15 minutes between each of those passes, you're not getting in a rhythm at all. It's like when I'm, think about it, a pitcher in a baseball game, you're constantly trying to break up that rhythm, right? It's, that's the hope. The more guys you get on base, the more you can slow a dude down. That's how you break a rhythm. This, like, Brumley can't, like, how are you getting in a rhythm throwing the ball 6 times? And so, like, even if he's not the best quarterback, you throw the ball 6 times and they're all spread out over the course of 4 quarters with 10 minutes between every pass. Like, and so I don't mean to be and none of these kids that if they go on to play in college are going to play this form of football. And I love Aubrey. I wanted them to be great this year. I think they have a ton of talent over there. After watching this game,
they're physical. That is one thing they have going for them. It's physical.
They have some athletic kids. I was sitting there watching it on the sideline. They have great athletes, got big dudes over there. It's just that offensive style. It's hurting them.
Especially when you're down, it doesn't bode well to be trailing, and then you're trying to get an 8-minute drive to cut the lead in half.
Yeah, just if you want to run that while you're ahead, that's great. And I think that offensive style will win them a district title, probably. Like we talked about before.
That's what I was just about to say too. Like in their district, it's probably
Like, is that the end goal? Because I feel like I think this team has way too much talent to just be settling for district titles. There's too much talent in Aubrey for that.
I think though in their region, especially just their division as well. I think there's a lot better teams than Aubrey. Salina comes to mind. Anna comes to mind. Tyler Chapel Hill, shout out Nick Harris, and one of your 13 schools. There's a lot of good teams in that division of 4A, and I think the goal really is just to be district champions and build a foundation for maybe next year. You're going to be graduating a lot of kids again as well, but still bringing back a lot. So maybe it is just we're building the foundation. It is also still just a pre-district game, so maybe we're not trying to show everything right now. We're still trying to work on our fundamentals. But the fundamentals got you beat pretty soundly last night. So if
Yeah,
you
and
run
your
up,
defense played well. I liked how the defense played. It's just you're
outs-
making it really hard. Like you're giving up. It's not that you give up 31 because the defense played poorly. You're giving up 31 because your offense
can't
is
stay on the field.
You can't like it. What you stayed on the field one drive.
Yeah, and outside of a few plays where Christian Trickett just out athletic you, you're in this pretty much. So there's opportunity. It's just it's hard to see where that opportunity exists exactly or how it's going to evolve come district play when you're sitting at 0-4 and you've scored 7 points your last 2.5 games. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's rough sledding, but
I just brought that up because it's just, and I know I went on a little rant. It's just like these, like sitting there. It's just like, and I'm talking to, I talking to some Aubrey fans, and it's like, I think they were kind of tired of it, and like, I don't know if they knew if like what their deal, what it was for them. It's just, you can tell. It's just like they have so many athletes over there, and it's like you just that style offense doesn't get those players with the ball in space. And you watch better team, like you watch high level teams at any level, you get the playmaker, the ball in space, and all of a sudden you're forcing a safety or a linebacker or somebody in that secondary to try to tackle somebody who's faster than they are. Tackling an open space is hard to begin with, but then you have some freak speedster dude running around like Tyreek Hill. It's like, good luck, have fun.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So yeah, no, it was to me from the box, it was kind of a boring game.
It was not the most exciting.
And like we were talking about before the show started, it kind of sucks the life force out of you. You're just kind of like, all right, let's get this done. I'm glad it didn't drag on or it didn't go into 4 overtimes like Anna and Salina, but it just kind of was what it was. And now you gear up for district play next week. It starts with Bridgeport for Aubrey, a team that is also 0-4. So maybe you know where you are and you're ready to kind of put it on your district foes. And Panther Creek, cannot remember who they play, but I think they're going to have a layup in North Dallas. So
that sounds correct.
Yeah, North Dallas is who they opened up against at Franklin Field. So we'll see it. We'll see how it progresses. Maybe these teams completely go in opposite directions from where they're at now, or they continue to ride where they're at. So we'll see. But it was real
quick before we ditch this game. I just want to bring up. Sorry to interrupt one more time.
No, you're good.
Panther Creek. Actually, getting to see them in person, I love them more than I did just seeing the box. The box scores were awesome to see. Just keeping up with them, but I like them a lot more having actually seen them in person. Braxton Roberts just maybe it's because he's taller than Brendan Meyer. I feel bad for saying Brendan Meyer was short, but and then you telling me like no, it's just Khalil Smith was playing home wrecker the entire game.
Well, you're not wrong in that Brendan is a little on the shorter side. He's maybe like 5'10", 5'11".
Smith is just a beast.
Yeah.
So that was good to know. It's just he was throwing off his back foot because there was
that much space. Yeah, for sure.
He physically could not have stepped up and thrown. So like there's like a poise with Braxton Roberts that I was kind of. There's not a lot of high school quarterbacks kind of have where he just
commands it. He commands the offense.
He just kind of commands it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then obviously Trickett. Dude's a stud. Great receiver.
Yep.
And then they had a couple other receivers. Seth Jackson. Okay, yeah, it's Jackson and then Travis. So Seth Jackson, Darren Travis looked pretty good, and then just all the other guys behind them just kind of get the job done. And the nice thing is it looked like they felt the coaching staff and everyone felt comfortable throwing the ball to a lot of different guys and those quick screen passes and anything. So
yeah, it's screen and middle route to death, and then you go over the top to Trickett.
Yeah, they felt comfortable trying a lot of different stuff with that passing game, and so that Carter game is the one that I'm kind of got circled on the calendar. If they can go out and beat Carter, I don't know if Panther Creek is going to be able to take down Salina. I think
It'll be fun to watch.
That could be a very fun game to watch. That's why that Carter game is circled for me. How they play that Carter game is going to be very important. Is going to be huge.
Yep.
How that turns out. But Salina and Anna, for anybody that's keeping up with that district, Salina and Anna last night, 42-40, 4 overtimes. I mean, I think what we're seeing is Anna and Salina are just those two juggernauts are.
They're destined to meet in the playoffs again.
I want to go to that playoff game really
absolutely,
bad.
And it would be a late round one too, I think. So that would be even better.
It feels like those two teams. I don't know. I don't know who's stopping those two teams other than those two teams.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that's kind of it for me talking about. I enjoyed. I had a lot to talk about with this one particular game. I don't know why.
Oh man, you get on a heater. You have some opinions. Yeah. That's what this show is about. It's not about.
It's a weird thing to have opinions. I feel like I had bizarre opinions. I think it comes down to I like points, and the Aubrey offense is not. It's like if we can win 14-0, great.
Okay.
If we do like that's what it's. Hey, I'm not going to fault you if you win in football games. I wouldn't.
So we need to start looking at
football games.
Yeah, so we need to start looking on the calendar for games that are going to be only points only, defense optional, right?
Yes.
Okay, you just want to run up and down the sideline chasing video and photo opportunities.
Yeah, you know how easy it is to like get highlights. Like I could just stand in the same end zone.
That's true. That's true.
Like last night was so much harder to like get highlights because it's like one of the teams was just like. If I just don't get like it's just they just keep running it.
Yeah, I mean I caught myself.
It was so easy getting highlights for like the last 3 games from up to that Thursday night game. It was so easy because every game was like 70+ points. It's like impossible to not have a cool highlight package.
Yeah, no, I mean I even caught myself. I think middle of the third quarter. I was like, oh crap, I haven't really tweeted anything about this game because it's so boring. I was just lost in my own head and everything. So I hear you. So let's move off of that one. We'll talk about better games for you next week moving forward. Next week should have some point games and everything, so we'll find one. All right, so we got some top offensive performers, and we're still working through the defensive stats, so that's why we lean just on offense because they're not readily available on the defensive side until we find them on Max Preps or the coaches send them in or whatever. So with that being said, top 5 offensive performers, and it's really hard this week, to be honest. I told you about the averages earlier, and I'll run through them again. Top 10 averages for passing, rushing, and receiving. 312 yards passing, 3.4 touchdowns. Rushing was 145.7 and 1.2 touchdowns. And receiving was 165.3 and 2.2 touchdowns. So with that, just in your top 10 performers, that makes it really hard to find 5 guys each week to talk about their performances, but we're going to do it. We're going to try, and this is no slack to Trickett, who we just talked about, or Braxton Roberts, or anybody else. But first off, we're going to lead off with Cade Bortnam for Lake Dallas. He went 25 of 31 for 454 yards and 5 touchdowns in their win over Grand Prairie last night. So number 1. Number 2 is Moses. Oh my God! I knew I was going to mess this up as soon as I started saying it. Adalowo for Braswell. Apologize for bastardizing your name, but 28 carries for 254 yards. No tutties, but he did get a lot of yardage on just 28 carries. So big game for him to help lead Braswell in that win. A couple of Argyle kids next. We have John Gailey at quarterback, 13 of 20 for 366 yards and 5 touchdowns. All of those touchdowns went to Will Krzyzak, who had 8 catches for 285 yards. And again, those 5 scores. So that duo was in sync last night against Montgomery, and you want to see that moving forward out of those two, or at least solid, replicable play for John Gailey moving forward. And then Cade Bortnam's partner in crime for Lake Dallas, the wideout, Keondae Henry, he had 10 catches for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. So huge performances for those 5. That does not account for everybody else who had some great games as well. You can go to our website at DenkoGridiron.com. Go to stat leaders at the top, and then you can see the weekly leaders each week broken out. Like I said, we're still working on defense, but you can just kind of see how hard it is to, mention everybody. We didn't mention. I mean, we talked about them earlier, but Ty Tabor had a great game. Samaj Jordan Rector had a great game as well. Iffy Duorode for Northwest had a great game. Tristan Air. I mean, there's a lot of players that had solid impacts this week, and just can't name them all. So,
well, I know, like there's probably going to be players from like Reedy that we could mention on that defensive side that we haven't, because I know Cole Smith had dude had one rushing touchdown again. They use him in
a couple sacks,
and his rushing. He picked up a couple first downs. Like it's not crazy rushing yardage, but it's like
it's just impact though.
It's insane what he does. He only comes in on offense for big plays.
Yeah, or that one drive where he started at the Wildcat when they were down in their 4, and ran 2 plays, and then went off the field, and then came at the end and got the touchdown. So I mean, he's the tone setter for that team in general. And he told us as much too. He was very clear about that.
I'm gonna cut that cut up so we can have that out there, because dude's awesome.
Yeah,
if you ever get the chance, he's one of my favorite players I've ever gotten to watch.
Do you remember the Bart Scott meme where he's like, "Can't wait," where you interview him and he's talking about somebody, he says, "I can't wait." That's who he reminded me of when we were talking with him.
He reminded me of somebody from some interview, and I wonder if that's what it is, because he just has that energy, and he's awesome too. He's just a great, awesome personality, and that you can.
Sure.
He's just got. It's like when the ball's snapped, you can tell that switch gets clicked, and then when the play is not going on, he's just out there having fun. He's like dancing, enjoying life.
For sure. I mean, that's what makes collegiate and high school football pretty damn awesome, is the fun that the kids will have on the sideline and everything.
I love it.
And real quick before we hit our party words, I just want to say follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter or X. Follow us on Threads. Follow us on YouTube. Whatever you want to follow us on Facebook as well at Denko Gridiron. Coaches, we appreciate the stats that you send our way. We just got a link from Max Preps for the Denton game. Nathan Beetleman over at Aubrey, he just sent me stats. Chance Rogers. So every coach, if you're watching, listening after the fact, whatever, I'm going to send you an email here soon. Send us those stats, or I'll research on Max Preps as well. If you would like to contribute to the show, or send us stats, or contribute to the platform in general, you see the email right there, info@denkogridiron.com. Reach out to us. Help us help you help us be successful. So that's all I have to say for this week. We just appreciate the help. Lee, what you got for us?
All I got is that it is time to go sit down. I know you've been watching a little bit of those early kickoffs and stuff, because that's what you're supposed to do. You watch us while you watch college football. That's
absolutely
that's the correct way to do this.
There's only one way.
Don't be doing anything else. Like, it's Saturday.
Yeah,
you watch your high school football recap show about all your favorite local teams.
Then you go to Big Noon Kickoff and watch Dion.
Oh yeah, wait, no, they're a college.
It was a joke. I know, like 2 weeks in a row, Big Noon Kickoff was with a Colorado game, so I just found it hilarious how much.
It was 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, so the first week at TCU, and then last week with Nebraska, and so it's basically Fox has hitched that wagon on Deion Sanders in that sideshow. So
that's weird. I good for Colorado, good for whatever.
For Colorado, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good for them. All right. I don't have anything else, man, other than I'm excited. There's some pretty cool games, I think, coming up here on the schedule, and we'll be tweeting that out and let you guys know what's coming up. Be on the lookout for anything on Instagram, any videos. Bye.